Okay, so this is take number 3 trying to get through this video. God is just attacking my Wi-Fi today. I don't know why. I have gigabit internet, and he just does not want me to make this video. But we're gonna push forward. We're gonna keep going. We're gonna make it whether he wants it or not.
One of the pushbacks I get from unbelieving family is about
So the title of this video from Cross Examine, another apologetic by Frank Turek. What about rape laws in the Old Testament? That's the title of this video. And now, the only apologetic that I will agree with for rape, slavery, genocide, all these atrocities is God was wrong for this. I'm going to have to ask him about this at some point, whether it be in the afterlife or whatever. You, that's the only thing I'll accept. Anything else, you're disgusting. If you're making apologetics for this, trying to say, well, it wasn't really genocide. Well, rape was meant to protect the value of the what. You're awful. Stop doing that. Just say, wow, that's awful. God's going to have to answer for this. Maybe the Bible got it wrong. Why God wouldn't correct it, I don't know. But to try to make apologetics, to make it seem like it's something completely different, I mean, that's what apologetics is. I get that. But the level of dishonesty is incredible.
some of the atrocities in the Old Testament.
Yes.
Specifically, a woman having to marry her rapist or vice versa. I mean, I sort of have an
The rapist has to marry the woman. I get it.
answer for it, but it's sort of difficult to press in today's culture. And then, some of the other wars and
Now, mind you, I mean, the rapist has to marry the lady. Now, specifically, the male rapist has to marry the female. Not just rapists have to marry whoever they raped, but the man has to marry the female. At no point in time is the autonomy of the female ever even entered into the equation. What would be disgusting and awful, but a little bit better than what's in the Bible, is that the woman could have the option to marry, but no, she doesn't get that option. She's not. She's just completely left out of this choice.
what are perceived by some as genocides and things like that. So how would you
Right.
answer?
All right. Let's deal with the
those
rape
concerns?
issue first, because that's
Sure.
a big one.
Let's deal
The
with
best
it.
book on this topic is by Paul Copan.
Paul
Who is a
Copan
brilliant scholar,
is
teaches
God a Moral
at
Monster. He loves this book. I think he's shilled for it in just about every video, which is obviously paying off because I purchased a copy. I will be going through it and doing some counter apologetics for this book that he just glorifies. I'm sure it's just as awful as every other apologetic I've ever heard, but I am going to go through it. So I guess his shilling has paid off.
Palm Beach University.
Oh,
He's written a
like
number
you
of
don't
books.
know.
This is the book. Is
You
God a
love
Moral
Paul
Monster?
Copan. You know exactly.
Here is what he talks
teaches.
about with regard to this issue. First of all, before we even address it, is the person that that's bringing up this objection, is this person an atheist?
She's more anti-God than an atheist.
So that's even worse.
Sure.
Right.
Yes.
One thing you could just ask her, why do you think rape is wrong?
Because once you have some type of standard for morality, or once you set goals for morality, now you can start to set standards for that morality. So secular humanism kind of takes care of a lot of this and leaves the wiggle room for the what ifs and the maybes and all these kind of obscure things. But secular humanism sets this standard for morality. Morality isn't complicated. I think Christians have to try to make it complicated to try to put this objective lawgiver into place, but it's really not complicated. Just set a goal for what you want the outcome of morality to be, and if you set that goal for happiness or well-being, you can now start to set objective standards to reach that goal. So if your goal is well-being and happiness, now you can say that rape is objectively immoral. to reach those goals. Because if everybody were to take the action of rape, everybody would be getting raped. Nobody wants to get raped. That decreases well-being, and it's that simple. It's really that easy. Morality is not complicated.
I mean, if there's no God,
Right.
if evolution is true, and there is no God, and by the way, even if evolution is true, doesn't mean there's no.
So I've said this probably in every counter-apologetic video that I've given, but if you have a God who is not there to clarify his positions on morality, then you no longer have the objective morality that you claim to have. And if you say, if the objective lawgiver says that a woman must marry her, or I'm sorry, a man must marry the woman that he rapes, then you have to stick to that. You don't have the wiggle room. Now you can say that this doesn't apply to us today, and that's fine, but you would still have to justify that at some point in time it was moral, and it was moral at some point in time for a woman to be forced to marry her rapist, and that's disgusting. But you can't get out of that because you have an objective lawgiver. There's no room for discussion about that in the Christian worldview.
No God.
Right.
I could go into that now. I don't have time. But say there is no God, and we're just overgrown germs, then there's nothing wrong with raping to propagate our genes, right?
Sure.
So
It is once you set that standard of well-being, because the only goal isn't to propagate our genes. It's to thrive, increase happiness, increase well-being. Well, I mean, I just said it.
in other words, she's stealing a standard from God to say God doesn't exist.
She didn't
But
say God
let's
doesn't
deal with the
exist. She
question
said
on
she's
rape
anti-God.
directly.
There's a big difference.
Here's what Copan says. There are three different scenarios in this section of Scripture. This is Deuteronomy 22, 23 to 29. There's a
So this is my third take of this video, so I've already seen about 75% of it. And what I realized in this section is that he talks about rape once. I don't know why he's bringing up adultery or seduction. Neither of those are rape. Neither of those have anything to do with the question that's being asked. I don't know why he talks about it.
adultery, there's rape, and there's seduction with no resistance. Okay? And here's
Just bear in mind, the title of the video is What About Rape Laws in the Old Testament? And he's talking about adultery and seduction. I don't know if it's to fill time or to make his answer feel or seem more elaborate than it really is, but it's 100% irrelevant.
here's how this plays out. If they were actually involved in adultery, they're both married, then capital punishment was the punishment.
So if you're married and you cheat, regardless of if you're male or female, there's capital punishment. I didn't see the specific verse, Deuteronomy 22, 23. But capital punishment, when you're talking about Old Testament capital punishment, it's probably to be put to death. I don't think you should be put to death for adultery. I mean, that's pretty harsh. I would say that that's definitely immoral. But I'm able to do that. I can say, well, if everybody who cheated on everybody were to be killed, it would probably decrease the amount of adultery, but maybe not, because we already have, I mean, in a lot of states in the U.S., murder is to be put, is punishable by death. You can be, lethal injection, whatever, and people still murder. So maybe it would decrease the amount of adultery, but it would also increase the amount of death. And I don't think that's a good counter. But yeah, I mean, you have an objective lawgiver. He gave the law that if you cheat, you're to be put to death. So you can't wiggle out of that.
In the Old Testament for adultery. If it's rape, it's capital punishment for the man.
So Deuteronomy 22:25 says that if a man rapes a woman and they're not caught, nobody notices it, there's no witnesses, that he's to be put to death. Or it says that only the man shall die. So just ask yourself that if there's no witnesses, why would the man be put to death? the only way that you could really answer that is if the woman reports him. But now, since there's no witnesses, you have a scenario where it's, now mind you, we're talking about ancient Near East. Now it's the woman's word against the man's word. How many times do you think that they believed the woman who says this man raped me over the man who says I absolutely did not? How many people do you think were actually put to death for a woman making the claim that she was raped by a man? I mean, or just ask yourself, how many times do you think that the woman's word was believed over the man's word? Probably never. But again, that's only if they weren't caught. There's a different set of rules for if they were caught. I'm sure he'll go over those.
Obviously, the woman is not guilty. If it's seduction, if the woman was not pledged to be married, the man was to pay a fine, was obligated to marry her unless her father refused.
So now we're talking about seduction, which is if there was two consenting, if it was consensual sex, there was no rape involved, that he was obligated to marry her because for some reason virginity was held up on this crazy pedestal, and he's now decreased the woman's value by taking her virginity away. So now he's got to marry her. But again, we're not talking about rape, so I don't know why he's talking about it.
He could never divorce her. This ensured her security because in the ancient Near East culture, she would be ostracized and unable to find a husband and protection. In other words, if she just agreed to have intercourse with this guy, this is not a rape situation.
I appreciate him acknowledging that it's not a rape situation. I wish he would explain why he's talking about it at all.
Was what was told by God to do.
So it's a misunderstanding
it
that
is.
Someone has ever, or that it was ever in the Bible that...
Exactly. You've got to know the Hebrew to understand what the differences are. The last point is this. The Old Testament...
So he moved off that question really quick. Exactly, and that's what difference you guys know with the Hebrew. The last point is this: he's got to move on from that because what she just said was, so it was just a misunderstanding that if a man rapes a woman, that he must marry her afterwards. She said it was just a misunderstanding, and he said exactly. And this is. I'm not going to say that this is the most dishonest I've ever seen Frank. I'm going to say that he is flat out lying. There's no dishonesty or manipulation or. He's just flat out lying. He said it's clearly stated in the Bible. It's clearly stated. But I'm sure he'll go over it, right?
Testament law is not applicable today only for the...
I don't care. I hear this a lot for various apologetic... I hear this apologetic a lot on various atrocities in the Bible. That was back then. It was immoral to rape back then. It's immoral to rape now. It doesn't matter. I don't care what time period you're in. If it's immoral, it's immoral.
Theocracy of ancient Israel. So I would suggest that in today's culture, while our punishment isn't as extreme, we agree that adultery is wrong. That
what's the punishment for rape that's caught, that's discovered? What's the punishment for it?
Rape is wrong, and if people consent to have sex, somebody ought to take care of a woman if she's in trouble. We agree. This is the same agreement right now. So sure. There's a lot of nuance to this, and of course the atheists and the...
So this is part of the video I haven't seen. Did Frank just say that we're in agreement that if somebody has sex with a woman, he ought to take care of her? What if the woman doesn't want to be... So if you have consensual sex with somebody... you're just obligated to take care of her forever, and she's obligated to stay with you forever, unless her dad says. Did Frank really just? We're gonna go back. Maybe I misheard, but if Frank is saying that that this is the same value that we should hold now, that if you have consensual sex with a woman, that you are now obligated to her and she is now obligated to you, unless her dad says otherwise. That's ridiculous. I hope I misheard. I really do. We're going to go back just a little bit. Maybe I misheard.
Adultery is wrong, that rape is wrong, and if people consent to have sex, somebody ought to take care of a woman if she's in trouble. We agree. This is the same agreement right now. So, sure.
Okay. He does say that. Wow. So, Frank, You're literally saying, now he twisted it a little bit. He's still awful for saying what he just said, but he twisted it. But that's not what it says that he's obligated to marry her. So if we're in the same agreement that we are now, that if you just have consensual sex with somebody, that you're now obligated to marry her, she's obligated to marry you, or that you're obligated to now take care of her, that's absolutely ridiculous. Come on, Frank.
There's a lot of nuance to this, and of course the atheists and the anti-theists don't want nuance. They want to try and
I love me some nuance. What are you talking about?
call God evil when they have no standard of good by which to call God evil.
Right.
All right?
No, God's evil.
Themselves.
Yes,
This was
that's
not a
right.
Good, which is very dangerous.
Uh-huh.
Thanks.
Thank you, Kristen.
Okay, so that was awful. We didn't even get into. Let me just pull up his slideshow here. He loves Paul Copan. Okay, we're gonna leave it paused here. So, rape. I'm gonna read the slide that's up on his screen now. Rape in the Old Testament. 3 different scenarios. I don't know why we're talking about. There's not 3 different scenarios of rape. There's only just one scenario of rape, and he doesn't even go over the part that addresses her question. He talks about seduction, which is ridiculous. And it almost seems like he's trying to make a play that he was obligated to marry her, because the original question was that if a man rapes a woman, that he's obligated to marry the woman. And that's exactly what he has posted on the screen. And then he says, unless her father refuses. But that's only for consensual sex. That's not for rape. And the adultery and the seduction just has nothing to do with it. So he, in this rape apologetic, which is disgusting, he gives one verse that talks about rape. And that is capital punishment for the man. But if you look at, what is this, Deuteronomy 25 or 22:25. So we got Deuteronomy 22 pulled up here. Deuteronomy 22:25. But if out in the country a man happens to meet a young girl, a young woman pledged to be married, and rapes her, only the man who has done this shall die. Do nothing to the woman; she has committed no sin deserving death. This case is like that of someone who attacks and murders a neighbor. For the man found the young woman out in the country, and though the betrothed woman screamed, there was no one there to rescue her. So this is saying that if what I already talked about earlier, if it would be her word against his, you can just use your imagination to see how many times that he that the woman's word was taken over the man. But then it continues on, and he doesn't talk about this at all. Now, if a man happens to meet a virgin girl who is not pledged to be married, oh, you know what? I just realized this. But if out in the country a man happens to meet a young woman pledged to be married, so what if she's not pledged to be married? Doesn't really say anything about that. So you can only assume that this doesn't apply because they're specific to say that she is pledged to be married. If a man happens to meet a virgin who is not pledged to be married and rapes her, and they are discovered, he shall pay her father 50 shekels of silver. He must marry the young woman, for he has violated her. He can never divorce her as long as he lives. So, he kind of piles all in the seduction thing. This has nothing to do with seduction. This has nothing to do with seduction. The seduction verse is here. Where is it at? If a man seduces a virgin who is not pledged to be married and sleeps with her, he must pay the bride price, and she shall be his wife. If the father refuses to give her, this is the seduction part. If a man seduces a virgin, this is the seduction. But he's lumped all of this together to make it seem as though they're talking about the rape. He's making it seem like the seduction in Exodus and the rape in Deuteronomy meld together, but it's wholly separate. So if the woman was not pledged to be married, the man was to pay a fine and was obligated to marry her unless her father refuses. That's the Exodus 20. Now he lumps this together. He could never divorce her. Deuteronomy 28 and 29 is not talking about the seduction. It's talking about...
If the woman was not pledged to be married, the man was to pay a fine, which was obligated to marry her unless her father refused.
28 and 29, this is talking about the rape. He must marry the young woman, for he has violated. He can never divorce her for as long as he lives. A man is not to marry his father's wife. That's weird. So it's just the level of dishonesty. He didn't even go over these verses. Now it's on the slideshow here, 28 and 29. This is talking about the rape, but it has nothing to do with seduction. This is dishonest apologetics at its finest. Nothing to do with seduction. Why is it under the category of seduction? It's ridiculous. It's dishonest. Rape apologetics are disgusting. The Bible's take on rape is disgusting and immoral. I can say that without my foundation for morality. You can't say that because you have this objective lawgiver. It's disgusting. I mean, I got nothing else to say on it. Stop this. Just say it's wrong. Say the Bible's immoral. Just say it. But, I mean, you can't because it's objective morality according to you.